I'll greatly appreciate it.
Thank you for having us.
I think we're going to start with a brief intro of yourselves. Ilya, please emphasize the Israeli roots.
Oh, for me to introduce myself?
A few.
Sure, yeah. I mean, hi everyone. So, indeed, from the ages of 5 to 16, I lived in Jerusalem. I studied in the Open University from 2000 to 2002. After that, I moved to the University of Toronto, where I spent 10 years. And I got my bachelor, master's, and PhD degrees. And already during grad school, I was fortunate to contribute to important advances in deep learning. Then, with a few people, we started a company that was acquired by Google, and I worked there for some time. And then, actually, one day, I received a cold email from Sam saying, "Hey, let's hang out with some cool people." And I was very curious. I went, and that was the first original dinner with Elon Musk and Greg Brockman, where we decided to start OpenAI. And then we've been at it for quite a few years. So that's where we are right now.
Thank you. Sam?
I was very excited about AI as a little kid, like a big sci-fi nerd. Never really thought I'd get the chance to work on it, but then ended up at university, studied it for a little while. It wasn't working at all. This was like 2004 timeline. Dropped out, did startups, became a startup investor for a while. Really got excited about what was happening with AI after the advances that Ilya mentioned. Sent him that email, and here we are.
Okay. So to get things started, I wanted to ask you, what do you think is it about OpenAI that makes it a leader in generative AI? Especially when its competitors are often much larger, have more resources. So what do you think are the key advantages?
Focus and conviction. I think we always believe further out on the horizon than the bigger companies, and we're more focused on doing what we do. I think we have a lot of talent density, and talent density is super important, I think misunderstood. And then we have a culture of rigor and repeatable innovation, and to have both of those in one culture is difficult and rare.
Yeah. I'll add to Sam's, so I can only add a small amount to Sam's answer, which is, test 1, 2, 3. Okay. To add to Sam's answer, I can only add 5% to Sam's answer, which is progress in AI is a game of faith. The more faith you have, the more progress you can make. And so if you have a very, very large amount of faith, you can make the most progress. And it sounds like I'm joking, but I'm not. You have to believe. You have to believe in the idea and to push on it. And the more you believe, the harder you can push. And that's what leads to the progress. Now, it's important that the thing you believe in is correct. But with that caveat, it's all about the belief.
Thank you very much. So moving on to other topics, progress in AI these days, and for a while now, is largely driven by industry. Right, so I was wondering what you feel should be the role of academic research in the field as it evolves.
Yeah. No, it is true. It is things have changed a lot. Academia used to be the place where the most cutting-edge AI research has been happening. Now, not so much, for two reasons. The amount of compute and the engineering. Academia has less compute and generally does not have an engineering culture. And yet, academia can make very dramatic and significant contributions to AI, just not to the most cutting-edge capabilities. The place that academia can contribute to, there are so many mysteries about the neural networks that we are training. We are producing these objects of miraculous and unimaginable complexity. What deep learning is a process of alchemy. We take the raw materials of data plus the energy source of compute, and we get this intelligence. But what is it? How does it work? What are its properties? How do we control it? How do we contain it? How do we understand it? How do we measure it? These are unknowns. Even the simple task of measurements. How good is our AI? We can't measure it. It wasn't a problem before because AI wasn't important. But now that AI is important, we are realizing we can't measure it. So that's just off the top of my head some examples of problems which no one can solve. You don't need a giant compute cluster. You don't need a giant engineering team to ask these questions and to make progress on them. And if you do make progress, that will be a dramatic and a significant contribution that everyone will take note immediately.
Thank you. So it sounds from your words, and actually relate to that, that there isn't exactly a balance between the progress in industry and in academia. We would like to see more contributions of those types. So I was wondering, is there anything you think that can be done to improve the situation, especially maybe from your position to somehow support? Or?
Yeah, so how can, I would say two things. The first and the most important thing, I think, is the mindset shift. I think that, so I'm a little bit removed from academia these days, but I think there is a bit of a crisis of what are we doing? And one thing that creates a lot of confusion, I claim, is there's a lot of momentum around a very large volume of papers is being written. But the important thing is to think about the most important problems. Just focus on them. The mindset shift on focus on the most important problems. What is it that we can't do? What is it if we don't know? We can't measure those systems. We can understand them. Realize the problem. Once you understand the problem, you start moving towards it. And that's where we can help. Like we have an academic access program where academic universities apply to get to get access to our most advanced models. Mm-hmm. They study them, they write papers. We've done it even with GPT-3, even before we've had our first product. Mm-hmm. Many universities have written papers studying their models, their properties, their biases. And I think there'll be, if you have more ideas, by the way, I'd be happy to hear them.
Yeah, so we should definitely discuss these things offline further. I need to fit into the time that I have. You mentioned publishing. So it seems to me, as somebody in the field, that some believe, or at least it's a fair argument, that the level of scientific transparency is somewhat in decline with regards to research going on in industry. And while there are players or companies that really promote open source, publishing their models, publishing their code, others do so less, and then some say that includes also OpenAI. So I was wondering, what do you feel about first of all, if you agree with this, and if so, what do you believe is the right strategy? Why is OpenAI's strategy the way it is?
We do open source some models, and we'll open source more models over time. But I don't think it's the right strategy to open source everything. If the models of today are interesting, they have some usefulness, but they're quite primitive relative to the models we'll create. And I think most people would agree if you make a super powerful AGI that has wonderful upsides, but existential downsides, open source may not be the best answer for that. And so we're trying to figure out the balance. We will open source some things. We will, over time, as we understand models more, be able to open source more. And we have published a lot. I think like a lot of the key ideas that other people are now using to build LLMs were published by OpenAI. And I think from the early GPT papers, scaling laws, some of the RLHF work. But it's a balance that we have to figure out as we go, and we have like a lot of different tensions on us to successfully manage there.
Yeah. So are you considering models where you maybe publicize things to selected crowds, maybe not open source to the entire world, but to scientists, or is that something you're considering?
When we finished training GPT-4, we spent a long time, almost 8 months, working to understand it, to ensure the safety, to figure out how to align it, had external auditors, red teamers, and scientific community engagement. So we do that, and we'll continue to do it.
Okay. So I want to talk a little bit about the risks. I know it's a topic that's being discussed a lot before we get to the opportunities. So
That's a good
just a
order.
couple of minutes on that, because I agree it's important. So there are probably at least 3 classes of risks that one can imagine. One is economic dislocation, jobs becoming redundant, things like that. Another one could be maybe a powerful weapon in the hands of few. One person, for example, a hacker could do probably something equivalent to thousands of hackers before, if they are able to use these tools. And the last maybe is, which is to some the most concerning, is a system that it gets out of control. Even the people that triggered it to do something can't stop it. So I was wondering what you feel like is a likely scenario on each of these.
Okay, the likely scenario on each of the risks. Economic dislocation. Let's start with that. So you mentioned 3: economic dislocation, hacker, super intelligent AI being out of control. Yeah, so economic dislocation indeed, like we already know that there are jobs that are being impacted or they're being affected. In other words, some chunks of the jobs can be done. If you're a programmer, you don't write functions anymore. Copilot writes them for you. If you're an artist, though, it's a bit different, because a big chunk of the artist's economic activity has been taken by some of the image generators. I think that indeed it's going to be not a simple time with respect to jobs, and while new jobs will be created, it's going to be a long period of economic uncertainty. There is an argument to be made that even when we have fully, we have full human level AI, full AGI, people will still have economic activity to do. I don't know whether that's the case. But in either event, we will need to have something that will allow for a soften the blow, to allow for a smoother transition either to the totally new professions that will exist, or even if not, then we want the government, the social systems will need to kick in. On the offense question, the hackers, yeah, that's a tricky one. Indeed, AI will be powerful, and it could be used in powerful ways by bad actors. We will need to apply similar frameworks similar to the one we apply with other very powerful and dangerous tools. Now, mind you, we are not talking about the AIs of today. We are talking about as time goes by and the capability keeps increasing, and eventually it goes all the way to here, right? Right now we are here. Today, that's where we are. That's where we're going to get to. When we get to this point, then yeah, it's very powerful technology. It can be used for amazing applications. You can say cure all disease. On the flip side, you can say create a disease. Much more worse than anything that existed before. That'd be bad. So we will need to have structures in place that will control the use of the technology that's powerful. Sam has proposed a document where we said the IAEA for AI to controlling very powerful technologies, but for AI specifically. That's the IAEA is the organization that controls nuclear power. To the last question, the super intelligent AI that's out of control. Yeah, that'd be pretty bad. Yeah, so it's like it would be a big mistake to build a super intelligence AI that we don't know how to control.
Can I add a few
Yeah,
things?
of course. Maybe bestow a bit of
Well,
optimism.
that part, I have nothing to add to that last sentence. I strongly agree. On the economic point, I find it very difficult to reason about how this is going to go. I think there's so much surplus demand in the world right now, and these systems are so good at helping with tasks, but for the most part today, not current jobs, that I think in the short term, the picture actually just looks pretty good. It's going to be a lot of dramatic productivity growth, and we're going to find out that if you can make programmers 2 times as productive, there's more than 2 times as much code that the world needs, so it's all good. In the longer term, I think these systems will do more and more complex buckets of stuff, and categories of jobs, some of them will go away. But some others will turn out to like really need humans and people really want humans in these roles in ways that are not very obvious. One example is that one of the first times the world saw AI was when Deep Blue beat Kasparov, and everyone said, chess is totally over. No one is ever going to play chess again because it's not interesting. And that was just consensus that everybody agreed with. Chess has never been more popular than it is right now. Humans have gotten better at chess. The expectation has gone up. We can learn better with these tools. But people still really want to play, and humans seem to still really care about what other humans do. Dali can make great art, but people still care about the human behind the art that they want to buy and that sort of we all think is special and valuable. On the chess example, like people watch humans play chess more than ever before too, but not very many people like watch two AIs play each other. So I think there are just going to be all of these things that are difficult to predict. The human desire to differentiate, to create new things, to sort of gain status, I think that's not going to go anywhere. But it will somehow look really different, and I would bet that the jobs of 100 years from now look almost nothing like the jobs of today, many of them. Some things will turn out to be weirdly similar. But I do really agree with what Ilya was saying, that no matter what's going to happen, we're going to need some sort of different socioeconomic contract as automation reaches these like heretofore unimagined heights.
Okay, thank you. Another question on this topic. So Sam, you recently signed a petition, right, calling for treating existential threat from AI with great seriousness. I'm not sure if
Ilya did too.
Ilya signed it as well. So I was wondering, kind of following this call, if there are any steps that you think we, mankind, and also maybe companies like OpenAI should take to address this problem.
I really want to emphasize what we're talking about here is not the systems of today, not small startups, training models, not open source, not the open source community. I think it would be a mistake to go put heavy regulation on the field right now or to try to slow down the incredible innovation. I hope we do get to talk about the benefits that's happening. But if we are heading towards, I think what Ilya said about you really don't want to make a super intelligence that is not really well aligned, that seems inarguable. And I think the world should treat that not as a, never going to come sci-fi risk, but something that we may have to confront in the next decade, which is not very long for the institutions of the world to adapt to something. And so one idea that we've contributed, and I hope that there's far better ones out there, is if we could get a global organization that at the very highest end, at the frontier of compute power and techniques, could have a framework to license models, to audit the safety of them, to propose tests that are required to be passed, that would help. That would be one way to treat this as a very serious risk. We do the same thing for nuclear, for example.
Okay. So let's indeed move on to talk about benefits a little bit. So this is kind of a scientific setting that we're in. So I was wondering, in terms of the role of AI in scientific discoveries, if you have any predictions or thoughts where we're going to be in a few years and maybe in the future beyond that.
This is the thing that I am most personally excited about with AI. I think there's like tremendous, wonderful things that are going to happen all over the place. Huge economic benefits, huge healthcare benefits. But the fact that AI can help us do scientific discovery that we currently aren't capable of, we're going to get to understand the mysteries of the universe. And more than that, I really believe that scientific and technical progress is the only sustainable way that lives get better, that the world gets better. And if we can go unlock a gigantic amount of new science, new technological progress, which I think we're already seeing the beginnings of with people using these tools to be more efficient. But if you imagine a world where you can say, hey, AI, help me cure all disease, and it helps you cure all disease, this can be a dramatically better world. And I think we're not so far away from that.
Okay. Another major problem alongside diseases is climate change. So I was wondering what your thoughts are and the potential role of AI there? Because I did see, Sam, that you did mention it as a potential area for contribution.
I think, I don't want to say this because climate change is so serious and so hard of a problem, but I think once we have a really powerful superintelligence, addressing climate change will not be particularly difficult for a system like that.
Yeah. We can even explain how. Here's how you solve climate change. You need a very large amount of efficient carbon capture. You need the energy for the carbon capture, you need the technology to build it, and you need to build a lot of it. If you can accelerate the scientific progress, which is something that a powerful AI could do, we could get to a very advanced carbon capture much faster. We could get to a very cheap power much faster. We could get to cheaper manufacturing much faster. Now combine those three: cheap power, cheap manufacturing, advanced carbon capture. Now you build lots of them. And now you sucked out all the excess CO2 from the atmosphere. And this plan today is a little bit difficult. If you have an AI which accelerates science and engineering very dramatically, it becomes very straightforward.
And I think this illustrates how big we should dream. You know, if you think about a system where you can say, tell me how to make a lot of clean energy cheaply, tell me how to efficiently capture carbon, and then tell me how to build a factory to do this at planetary scale. If you can do that, you can do a lot of other things too.
Yeah. With one addition, that not only you ask it to tell it, you ask it to do it.
Okay, so I want to ask a couple of questions about OpenAI products. So first of all, in ChatGPT, I was wondering, so you released it. I heard you say that you didn't expect it to kind of spread like it did. So I was wondering, is there any application of ChatGPTs that you saw by others that really surprised you in terms of the value that it generated or the capabilities that it exposed?
You want to go first?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just, a thing which has given me personally, an endless amount of joy is when my parents told me that their friends use ChatGPT in their daily lives. So I would say that this was definitely very surprising and very enjoyable for me.
It's hard to pick just like a couple of the favorite stories because it's like, it really is remarkable, the creativity of the world and what people do when you give them powerful tools. Education has been amazing for us to watch. The number of people that write in saying like, this has changed my life because I can learn anything now, or I learned this specific thing, or I couldn't figure out how to do this and now I know. There's something that I find personally quite gratifying and wonderful to see about people learning in a new and better way and imagining what that's going to look like a few years from now. But if we can just unlock human potential at this rate, we didn't quite expect that to happen, and it's been amazing. And then a fun story that I heard just yesterday, and I've heard like other versions of this in the past, was a guy that spends 2 hours every night with his kid collaborating to make up bedtime stories. And that it's just, the kid's favorite thing, and it's become this like special moment every night that they do.
Okay, thank you. And let's just one last small question before we move on to questions from the crowd. So in terms of what you can say, what is the most futuristic product that OpenAI is working on these days?
Most futuristic product?
Or system?
Yeah. It's like we don't think about it in terms of products. We think about it in terms of, can you improve the AI? Can you produce the next generation of the AI, of the model, of the neural network, which will be more reliable, better at reasoning, more controllable, better the whole thing. So you do this, and then you get a whole new world of applications. A bit hard to predict, but we expect everything to become much better and very significantly.
I hope the world is never awed at us again. I hope that, people had an update with ChatGPT, but from here on, it is one continuous smooth curve of progress. At every stage, we're confronting the risks successfully. It always feels, like it's doing what you want and it's safe to use. But every year, your expectations go up and we deliver on them. And it feels like this gradual acceleration of technology, but in a way that very much is a tool that serves you.
Okay, thank you. And now let's move on to some questions from the crowd. There's going to be a microphone.
That was a quick draw.
Yeah, but we will try moving forward. Have people raise their hands, and we're going to choose.
So, both of you, the question is, could the open source LLM potentially match GPT-4's abilities without additional technical advances? Or is there a secret sauce in GPT-4 unknown to the world that sets it apart from other models? Or am I wasting my time installing stable vicuña, 13 billion plus wizard? Am I wasting my time? Tell me.
All right, so to the open source versus non-open source models question, you don't want to think about it in binary black and white terms where, like, there is a secret source that will never be rediscovered. What I will say, or whether GPT-4 will ever be reproduced by open source models, perhaps one day it will be. But when it will be, there will be a much more powerful model in the companies. So there will always be a gap between the open source models and the private models. And this gap may even be increasing with time. The amount of effort and engineering and research that it takes to produce one such neural net keeps increasing. And so even if there are open source models, they will be less and less produced by small groups of dedicated researchers and engineers, and it will only be the providence of a company, a big company.
Hi,
Okay.
Can you tell us more about the base model before you lobotomized it, lined it?
What was the
About
question?
the base model of GPT-4.
What about it?
How was it before you lobotomized it?
We definitely realize that in the process of doing RLHF on the models, it loses important capability. We're studying how we can preserve as much of that as possible. The base model is not that easy to use, but what we'd like to get to is something that does follow instructions and gives users as much control and as much capability as possible. And doesn't get us in legal trouble, although we've discovered a lot of stuff like refusals to help with that. So we totally hear the request for more flexible models, and we're trying to figure out how to do that and give users more customization over them.
Okay, we have a question over there.
First of all, thank you so much for this talk. It's truly invaluable. I'm really curious to know what, in your eyes, are the top sectors that can be impacted for the better by individuals and small companies.
I didn't hear the question.
Can you repeat the question, please? There is a lot of echo.
Sorry. Really curious to know what, in your eyes, are the top sectors that can be impacted for the better by individuals and small companies.
One of the reasons we're doing this trip around the world is to hear from people about what they want, what they'd like OpenAI to do, what their concerns are, how they're thinking about regulation, how they're thinking about how they want this to be integrated in society. But the other is to talk to people that are building on top of our API and understand what they're doing and what they want to do. And for me, the most fun part of this trip has been meeting developers and just being amazed at the creativity, the scale of the businesses being built, the 1, 2, or 3 people that are building something that has now gotten to real scale in a product that people really love, and how that is happening in every industry. When we do these developer roundtables, almost never are two people working on the same kind of sector even. It's the diversity that is the coolest thing. I think any vertical you want to pick, AI is going to impact somehow, and this is probably the most magical period since the launch of the iPhone, at least, for a technological tidal wave to go do incredible things. So I think the most exciting part of this is it's not one or two sectors. It's just find some place that you're passionate about and go do it.
Okay. Let's now, every person that asks a question, start with name and affiliation.
Okay. Dror Globerman with Keshet Broadcast. First, thank you again for coming here. I appreciate this talk very much. And secondly, if you truly believe that AI imposes a danger to humankind, why keep developing it? Aren't you afraid for your own dear ones and family? And secondly, should regulation will imposed upon you, upon OpenAI and other AI companies, will you obey or behave much like, say, Mark Zuckerberg, who tried to evade every regulation he finds? Thank you.
I think it's a super fair and good question. And the most troublesome part of our jobs is that we have to balance this incredible promise and this technology that I think humans really need. And we can talk about why in a second, with confronting these very serious risks. Why to build it? Number one, I do think that when we look back at the standard of living and what we tolerate for people today, it will look even worse than when we look back at how people lived 500 or 1,000 years ago. And we'll say man, can you imagine that people lived in poverty? Can you imagine people suffered from disease? Can you imagine that everyone didn't have a phenomenal education and were able to live their lives however they wanted? It's going to look barbaric. I think everyone in the future is going to have better lives than the best people of today. And again, the upside there is tremendous. So I think there's a moral duty to figure out how to do that. I also think this is unstoppable. This is the progress of technology. It won't work to stop it, and so we have to figure out how to manage the risk. We were formed as a company in large part because of this risk and the need to address it. We have an unusual structure. We have a capped profit. I believe that incentives are superpowers, and if you design the incentives right, you usually get the behavior you want. So, we're gonna all do fine. We're not gonna make any more or less money if we make the numbers go a little further up to the right. We don't have the incentive structure that a company like Facebook had. And I think there were very well-meaning people at Facebook. They were just in an incentive structure that had some challenges. So we tried to take AGI, as Ilya always says, we tried to feel the AGI when we were setting up our company originally, and then we set up our capped profit structure. So how do we balance the need for the money for compute with what we care about is this mission? And one of the things we talked about is what's a structure that would let us warmly embrace regulation that would hurt us the most? And now that the time has come for that, we're out here advocating around the world for regulation that will impact us the most. So of course we'll comply with it. I think it's more easy to get good behavior out of people when they are staring existential risk in the face. And so I think all of the people at the leading edge here, these different companies now feel this, and you will see a different collective response than you saw from the social media companies. I think all the skepticism, all the concern is fair. We wrestle with this every day, and there is not an easy soundbite answer.
Hi, my name is Netanel Betzalel. I am a CEO at a small business, and I have to mention that we use GPT-4 a lot. It helps us a lot. And lastly, I spoke with a VP in Microsoft, and she told me how they decided to listen to AI because all of the A/B testing, the AI was right. And I just wondering, what is the gap between the AI you use, we have a lot of limitations with tokens and all of the things, and you don't have. But what is the gap between the power that you have to the power that we can use?
The gap that there is between the models that you use and the models that we use is the question. Well, I mean, right now, GPT-4, you have access to GPT-4, and so do we. Indeed, we are working on the next future model. Maybe I'll describe the gap as follows. As we keep building AIs of increasingly greater capabilities, there'll be a larger gap, a longer testing period, a longer period where we will red team, understand the limitations of the models, understand all the way, as many of the ways as possible in which it could be used in ways that we deem unacceptable, and then expand it gradually. So for example, right now, GPT-4 has vision recognition abilities which we have not rolled out yet because the finishing touches weren't quite there, but soon we will. So I think that would be an answer to your question.